Hi, and welcome to MI Colloquium Fall 2020. My name is Connie Pascal, and I'm the instructor for our MI Colloquium course here at Sky and the host of this event. This evening is also sponsored by Beta Phi Mu, the New Jersey Center for the Book, RU Libraries, the Sky LIS Department, and the Sky Alumni Association. Our topic for this evening is asking the important question: how do we verify that the digital images and social media posts we see and hear and read haven't been tampered with or altered? The title of our colloquium tonight is What Makes It Legit? Teaching Digital Verification to Spark News Literacy Learning. And we are delighted to have as our Beta Phi speakers for 2020 not one but two people from the News Literacy Project. Miriam Romeos, who's Senior Manager of Education and Training, and John Silva, Senior Director of Education and Training. We're going to start this evening with a brief welcome from Marie Radford, the chair of the LAS department at Sky, and then hear from Megan Darling, current president of Beta Phi Mu, who will tell us more about tonight's speakers. Please note that our official event will be wrapping up at 8 p.m., but that Miriam and John have agreed to stay on for an additional 20 minutes for informal Q&A. So with that, please welcome Marie Radford.
It's my really deep pleasure. Megan Darling, the current president of Beta Phi Mu, who I'm going to introduce in a moment, and all of us all the officers at Beta Phi Mu have been working really hard for this colloquium. Megan, it seems like it's been months. We've been trying to, so every year, for those of you students especially who are new to the program, we have one special colloquium every fall that is our Beta Phi Mu Fall Speakers Series. It is a really combined effort because we not only with Beta Phi Mu, but also the New Jersey Center for the Book, the LAS department, which I'm chair of, and the Rutgers University Libraries. And thank you to Dee. And Dee has been very generous. We were just, reminiscing about having wine and cheese. That was the Rutgers University Libraries and a beautiful room on the fourth floor, which was formerly the Scholarly Communication Center, and we just really enjoy. So we're doing it virtually this year, and the SC&I Alumni Association. And so what we do is we look for really top speakers for this fall colloquium. And I'm going to hand it over to Megan, who was really the one who had the idea to invite John and Miriam to be with us tonight. Megan is currently the Youth Services Librarian at Sparta Public Library, and she has been president of our Beta Phi Mu Association, which is the National Honor Society for Library and Information students. And so what you have to do is you have to maintain a high grade point average, and you also have to show leadership in some way, or research potential, or high scholarship to be nominated and then voted into to Beta Phi Mu. If anybody wants more information, we do have a website, the Omicron, Beta Phi Mu Omicron chapter website. So Megan, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Marie. Joining us tonight from the News Literacy Project is John Silva, Senior Director of Education and Training, and Miriam Romay, Senior Manager of Education and Training. The News Literacy Project was founded in 2008. It is a nonpartisan national education nonprofit. They are the nation's leading provider of news literacy education with a mission to provide programs and free resources for educators and the public to teach, learn, and develop skills to become more news literate. Tonight's What Makes It Legit presentation will explore the tools and skills that we as MI professionals need to verify the authenticity of information and ideas. So with that, I will turn it over to John and Miriam.
Great, thank you so much. I am really excited to be joining everyone tonight. Miriam and I have been talking about this for a while. This is talking to librarians and people working in this field is always a treat for us because we know that you guys have been doing this work a lot longer than many of us have. So we're going to talk about digital verification tonight in the context of how do we put all of these things together in a way to sort of lead people through to a pathway of how to verify information for themselves. So some of these skills that we're going to talk about are going to be familiar, but really the framing is like we have to think about these as a toolkit in a way of presenting it to people so that they can learn for themselves. So I am based in Chicago. I'm a former classroom teacher. I spent 13 years in Chicago public schools before I joined the News Literacy Project a little over 3.5 years ago. A lot of my expertise is really about professional development and training, but also in the last about 2 years, I've also been doing a lot of research into conspiracy theories, conspiratorial thinking. If you would like to reach out to me after tonight's presentation, my email address is there on the lower left of your screen. And if you're active on Twitter, I do share a lot of things related to trends and misinformation and conspiracy theories and the like. So if you would like to give me a follow, that is my handle there. And I'll let Miriam introduce herself.
I am making sure I'm unmuted. Okay, so hello everyone. So I work very closely with John. We handle all the professional development opportunities that the News Literacy Project offers. And when I'm not busy bossing Josh or John around, I'm a documentary photographer. That's my background. And that is actually my degree from Rutgers. So I'm a documentary photographer. I've worked a lot in adult education and have been a photo editor for a magazine called Nueva Luz, which featured photographers of Latino, African, Asian, and Native American heritage, which had a little bit of its origins at Rutgers. So it's kind of a nice little circle we're making right here. John, back to you.
Thank you. So just a little bit more about the News Literacy Project. We are a national, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. We were founded by Alan Miller, a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist formerly of the Los Angeles Times. And our primary focus is about educators and trying to teach news literacy to young people, primarily middle and high school students. But in the last couple of years, we've really expanded our mission and our vision to try to make news literacy part of the overall American education experience. And we mean that actually in the broadest possible sense, in that, yes, we do provide a lot of resources for traditional classrooms, but we also want to do things like we're doing tonight, right? Reaching out to other people who are doing other types of education, talking to the general public, because the reality is that we do have an information crisis these days. You know, people are making decisions based off of faulty information, misinformation, and the like. And so we want to be at the forefront of trying to make sure that people are more reliably informed, and as a result, being more active and engaged in the civic life of their communities. As an organization, we are also very active on social media. We encourage you to follow us on the main platforms that we publish information on. And if you'd like to engage with us and engage in the larger conversation about news literacy, use the hashtag NewsLitPD. This can connect you with other educators and people who are doing this work and sharing tips and resources on social media. I want to share the Internet Minute with you really quickly, just to sort of bring into focus how complicated this whole information world is. If you're not familiar with the Internet Minute, this is research done by Lori Lewis and Chad Callahan. They put this out every year. And this is a snapshot on average of what is transmitted in a single minute worldwide. And if you think about just how much information is transmitted regularly and consistently, and even just think about your own information habits today, like think about how many messages you sent, how many messages you read, how many searches you did, maybe, you know, it's just overwhelming. Now imagine you're a young person trying to learn how to navigate this and understanding that there, in all of this landscape is an incredible amount of misinformation. One of the things that we strongly want to encourage is that when we do talk about this, we stop using the term fake news. Once upon a time, fake news had a real definition. But in 2016, it turned into a weaponized, politicized term that more commonly refers to things that I don't agree with, or I don't want to see that. I'm going to be dismissive of it. But also, a lot of us are probably guilty of using it ironically, just being dismissive of something and calling it fake news. So when we're doing this, we need to recognize that misinformation is very complex. It comes in a lot of different forms. It can be communicated over a lot of different channels. And its main goal, misinformation's main goal, is to make things more confusing. And in that confusion, lead us down a path towards cynicism, where because we are so overwhelmed, instead of being critical, we tend to start to be more cynical. And then we start to believe that we can't trust anything. And I'm going to show you some examples of this, about what I mean, about how complicated this can be. So last month, in the lead up to the election, Eric Trump tweeted out this image. He deleted it not long afterwards. And when I took the screenshot, it had already been retweeted almost 6,000 times. And it continued to be amplified and shared, claiming that Ice Cube and 50 Cent were wearing these Trump hats. The reality is that these were photoshopped, and the logos of the original hats have been changed from what they were actually wearing. So photo manipulation is very common. We also have things that are taken out of context. Also in October, in the lead up to the election, this image and this claim made the rounds that former Vice President Joe Biden had taken a knee during the national anthem. When I took the screenshot, it had been shared over 2,000 times, and it fed into a very particular political viewpoint. The reality is that he wasn't kneeling during the national anthem, as we'll explain in a few minutes. It was actually during a photo shoot. We also see things like this, a lot of misinformation relating to the election. So somebody claimed that this person had received 2 mail-in ballots in California, as if they were going to be able to vote more than once. The reality is that they weren't real ballots. They actually weren't even from California. They were from Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. But the interesting thing here is that this image and this claim started to be shared across multiple platforms. So you can see here, this is a screenshot, just searching for this on Facebook. Multiple people are sharing the same image, the same claim. It's on Facebook. And then interestingly, it ends up on Pinterest, weirdly enough. And part of it is this phrase here, make it go viral. This is a warning sign for a lot of misinformation, putting it out there, almost a challenge us to share something. But what's interesting, and a lot of people don't think about Pinterest, but actually Pinterest has as much of a misinformation problem as other platforms. If you just search voter fraud, you can see all of these boards on Pinterest where people are just saving these voter fraud memes and using them as repositories, and they're all over the place. And so what starts on one platform ends up on others and starts to go massively viral. Here's another example. Can't really hear it, but there's like a low rumble of motorcycles. This was a video that was originally posted to TikTok, and then people downloaded it from TikTok, and then this person, Jake Schneider, on his verified account, posted the video to Twitter, claiming that these were motorcycle riders praying for President Trump and the First Lady. It's a real motorcycle rally. It's actually not even from the United States. It's originally from Pretoria, South Africa, at a motorcycle rally there. And this video and screenshots of it were amplified in many different ways. So in showing you all of these different things, one of the most important things I want you to remember when we're talking about news literacy, when we're talking about digital verification and fact checking, we don't want to focus on the platform. We can encounter misinformation and conspiracy theories and the like almost anywhere. The skills that we're going to talk about and how we teach them are about the content of information and the source of the information, because we can find it anywhere. One of my favorite things that I have to go find it again, but a couple of years ago, I was walking my son to school. He was in first grade at the time. And we came across a stencil on the sidewalk. It was the logo of Flat Earth Chicago. And I had to explain to my then 6-year-old that people believe that the earth is flat, right? We can encounter misinformation anywhere. So when we're talking about these skills, we shouldn't get hung up on any one platform over another. We've got to focus on how we verify the information. So I'm going to talk about 4 key skills. Miriam and I are going to talk about 4 key skills tonight. The first one being critical observation. And I'm actually going to hand over to the expert photojournalist here, the expert photographer, Miriam, to sort of take a look at critical observation.
So when we think about debunking, oftentimes we're like, okay, I need to do all this work and I need to look into this and I need to use technology and whatnot. But a lot of things that get overlooked is how we see things. And so much of what we see on social media and the news, everything is so visual, and misinformation is very visual. So if we take a look at this example for a minute, right? Like take a look at what it says. You saw it before when John posted it. All right. So what exactly are we, if we look closely, are there any flags for you that make you think or question the authenticity of what the claim about the photograph was? And please feel free to add this to chat. I would love to hear a little bit of feedback from you all, right? Like what are things you notice about this photograph that might be different than, oh my gosh, he's taking a knee during the national anthem? Looks like they're at a festival, cultural backdrop. Okay. Context doesn't seem like an obvious place to be playing the anthem. Okay. Okay, so context of the picture. What about the context of the picture? There we go. Okay, nobody has their hands over their hearts or is making any typical gestures. So you would imagine that within a group of people, somebody would be doing that, at the very least, Dr. Jill Biden, if somebody is kneeling. So perhaps, oh, people in the background aren't sitting down. Okay, so does anybody know what the actual context, yes, thank you, what the actual context of this might be? Like what was actually happening at the time? Okay, so this photograph was taken at a event in Little Haiti in Miami, and the dance group had just performed. So not necessarily a festival, but along those lines, right, where somebody is performing. And they're kindly trying to get out of the way of the photographer so they can take the photograph of the dancers in the background. So this was an example of something that we feature in the SIFT, which is our educators newsletter. We'll go into that later in the presentation. But let's go ahead and take a look at, like, we're going to come back to all these things. So using your observation skills, let's take a look at this image right here for a minute. So what do you think is happening here? And while you're mulling that over, I can tell you that to look at all the areas of the photograph and the content. The neat thing about photography is composition guides your eyes into one area, and then we kind of forget to look at the edges. So go ahead and examine the whole thing. But this is an authentic photo, political rally, yep. So this was an authentic photo of the MAGA march in support of President Donald Trump in Washington on November 14. And on social media, there were a lot of these images shared this one along with it, claiming that there were many more people there in support of the president. But if we take a look at this image, like what do we see as differences, right? Like if this is an image that just also happened in comparison to the other one, right? Clearly a different season, no flags. All right, good comments. Again, no flags. All right, so if you look at them side by side, right, it's easier to compare this. So we can clearly see that there's quite a few differences here. Not on the mall, all right. Glass building. All right, does anybody know what that crowd peters out in the back? Does anybody know what the event actually was? Yeah, a lot more people in the second picture. So if we compare the two, we see there's no flags, but look at also the lack of flags, but also the colors. In the other photo, it's a lot of warm tones. So there's a lot of people wearing yellow. Yep, exactly, Connie. Bright green trees, so it indicates a different season. So your flag should be going up right now, like, oh, something's a little bit hinky about what may have been a claim on social media about there were many more people at this particular event on this day that perhaps didn't happen. So the photo we're seeing over here on the right is the Cleveland Cavaliers Championship Parade in 2016. So when we're looking at photographs, think through like an observation checklist, right? Like we definitely want to look at architecture, landscape, you know, are there similarities? What are the differences? In some images, we might look at different clues according to seasons, like you all caught on to. Oh, sport colors, yeah, exactly. You know, clouds, trees, shadows, reflections, time of day. And for other images that we might dive in a little bit more closely, take a look at visible text. Like, are there street signs that we can read the text for? Business names, signs, bus routes, license plates on cars, and look at what the distinctive areas are in that image to see if that gives you the cue or a clue on what else you can be looking at. Right? Like sometimes, you know, like Occam's razor, right? If you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. So what skills can we apply just by looking that we don't even need to bring technology into it just yet? And we might be able to debunk something, or at the very least, raise a flag that this is something we really need to look further into. Certain things are so much easier to manipulate and in Photoshop, t-shirts, signs. So take a look at pixelation, halos around the outline of people and trees and buildings sometimes is an indication that something has been placed there that shouldn't be. Any type of color distortion. If you see repetitive patterns over and over again, that could be a cloned thing from Photoshop. And a lot of reputable organizations will have a photo attribution of who the photographer was that took that image. So take a look at copyright symbols or sometimes timestamps in images to see if there are any additional cues that you can find through there. So we're gonna move on to other types of skills. So I'll kick it back to John.
Because so much misinformation is visual, and images and memes are one of the most common types of misinformation, especially on social media. Reverse image search is a really important tool to teach people how to use. If you're not familiar with reverse image search, it is a very specific type of search where the search engine is going to try to match the pixel pattern of one image with the images in their search database. And it's going to try to find matching or at least as similar as possible in those search results. There are a number of them. I'll share a couple of them in a few minutes. And there's a couple different ways of doing it. There is one of the most common is searching directly from the browser, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But there are a couple of others. And there are some mobile apps available that you can put on your phones to do reverse image searches. So I'm going to go back to that, the Million MAGA March example. So this is an example of so this is a post from Facebook, posted a whole series of images from around the country that included authentic images, but also included this fake image here, or it's an authentic image, but this is from the 2016 NBA championship for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So what I'm going to show you here is when you have an image like this, when you right click on it, it's going to pull up a menu. And one of the things you'll look for is called search Google for image, or whatever your default search engine is. And what it's going to do is going to upload that image to the search engine. And the interesting thing is all of the results that you see that pop up relate to the Cleveland Cavaliers and their victory parade. So it's very easy to see very quickly when you search that image in particular that it's not from this last week at the Million MAGA March. But I want to show you, I'll show you a little bit more like step by step. So it doesn't matter what browser you use. All the major browsers have this functionality actually built into them. And what you can do is you can actually do a couple different things here. So you can do the search, in this case, search Google for image. You can copy the image address or the URL and search from there. You can also download the image and use that to upload. But when you're in a browser, it's easier just to do the search Google for image or search Bing for image. And with this one, what's interesting is that the first couple of images that pop up are directly related to the false image, right? So in this case, Google has recognized that it's related to 50 Cent and Ice Cube. It recognizes that. The first thing that pops up is a fact check. The second is a news article that talks about the altered image. But what's difficult is when you look at the collage of similar images that the database found, the ones that are at the top are what it considers to be the closest matches. If you look at them, a lot of them also have the same Trump logo on there. So there's actually multiple versions of that photo that we're manipulating. But you can also see that a number of them have nothing to do with that particular tweet. If you go down further and you look at the results, this is where things get a little complicated because one link is actually to Eric Trump's original tweet with the manipulated image, which has since been deleted. If you click on that, it doesn't pull up anything. But the interesting thing under that is from Ice Cube's Twitter account. And if you actually click on that, it pulls up the original tweet from July 6th that has the original authentic image. So the thing is that a reverse image search can lead you to a fact check, or it could actually lead you to the original version of an image. What's important is that we have to remember to be very careful about what we look at in the search results. So this chart, there are 4 main image search databases out there. And this is from a company called Domain Tools. They actually did a number of tests to sort of see how good they are at looking at different types of images that you're looking at. None of them are great at everything because it depends on how complex the image is that you're looking for. It depends on how unique it is because there's different ways of manipulating an image. Google and Yandex tend to be better than most. What's really fascinating is that Yandex is actually a search engine database based in Russia, which I always find delightfully ironic. Bing is getting a lot better at its results. Bing is actually relatively new to image searching, and TinEye is actually one of the older ones, but it's actually not that good anymore. They really haven't done a lot in the last year or so to keep up with a lot of the trends in photos and photo manipulation. But the key is You want to be deliberate about what you're looking for. If you can't find an image in one, try another one. I usually recommend starting with Google and then going to Yandex. It's also possible to do a reverse image search from a video. InVid has a tool called keyframes, which you can put a video clip into this and it will actually take some stills from a video and you can do an image search using InVid to sort of take a specific frame of a video. There are also a lot of browser extensions. Tineye has a browser extension. There's OneClick is a very good one that searches. So OneClick will search multiple search engines. So you can actually put a browser extension directly in there with Chrome. And as I mentioned earlier, it is possible to do it from your mobile phone. A lot of people will encounter this information on their social media feeds on mobile. And there's a lot of great apps out there that you can use where you can search using a screenshot, a URL, or saving an image to your phone. You want to find one that searches multiple databases. But the key is that there's a lot of different ways of doing it. Find one that works for you, find one that you're comfortable with, and learn how to use them to verify images. And one of the things that's also is like, you may not always get a clear answer, but you will often get leads. It'll lead you towards a path to start looking for additional information. Okay, so we're going to pause here for a second after we've sort of shared the first two skills to see if there are any pressing questions that anyone would like to raise before we move on to the next couple of skills.
Hi, if you'd like to go ahead and ask your question, you can take yourself off mute and on camera and ask your question. I think we're also stunned by the duplicity we see that
Yeah.
that we're speechless.
It's a lot. Okay. Feel free to interrupt anytime if you have something, if you want me to pause.
Yeah, just you can raise your hand and I can help you with that too, or put your chat or your question in the chat and we can answer it as well.
A third skill that's also really important that you might be familiar with is lateral reading. So the term lateral reading and the concept of it was developed by Sam Weinberg and Sarah McGrew at the Stanford Graduate School of Education, where they were doing research into civic online reasoning. So when I was a teacher, one of the things that was very popular was teaching kids about how to investigate a source using a checklist. And when I taught middle school, everyone loved the crack test, right? And these checklists would take you through a series of steps to verify what you were looking at. And that was actually reading vertically. You never really left the source. Lateral reading is this idea that if you can actually get to an answer faster if you open up a new browser tab and start searching for information while you're reading it, looking for information from other sources, looking to verify whether or not some of the details are true, evaluating the credibility of a source, getting more information, more background, more context. And this idea is that you keep searching until you have a level of confidence that what you're reading is either true or it's not. And a lot of the times you can learn within 20 to 30 seconds if something is not true. Stanford has a lot of great research into this. Also at the Stanford History Education Group, they've got a lot of great resources with this. There are some additional sort of tech skills that are involved, right? There are some shortcuts that you can use. A lot of you probably teach things like how to do a Boolean search, putting things in quotation marks. One of the most important things that we want to emphasize, and I'm sure a lot of this will be familiar to a lot of you, is the idea of click restraint. Don't just click on the first link that pops up in the search results. You want to evaluate the search results and then choose the one that you think might be most relevant. So I'm going to use this example. Back when President Trump had tested positive for COVID-19, He spent a couple of days at Walter Reed Medical Center. As he was leaving the hospital, this claim went viral that he left the hospital with a portable oxygen concentrator hidden in his jacket. And he actually had an oxygen mask under his face mask. So the interesting thing is if I do a reverse image search on this, chances are pretty good that I would probably just get images that look like a man in a blue suit. I might get lucky and find fact checks relating to this, but this is where I actually want to search some of the details. So one of the ways that is actually really effective is phrasing your search in the form of a question. Because search engine databases and their algorithms are getting really good at recognizing questions as fact checks. So you want to use a question. If there's a specific phrase, you want to put it in quotation marks. So it searches for that exact phrase. You want to be very careful about spelling, right? If you put a typo in there, you may mess up your results. But the idea is like you want to be as detailed as possible so you get very specific results. So here, by putting this in the form of a question, the very first things that pop up are 3 fact checks. One from Snopes, one from Reuters, one from PolitiFact. So it's prioritizing those fact checks because if I actually go down and I look at the rest of the results, these actually aren't relevant to what I'm trying to verify because these are more broadly about the president's health, about whether he had oxygen while he was in the hospital and the like. So the thing is like we have to be very careful about what we're looking at. So we often get a lot of questions about which fact check organization do you recommend? I don't always recommend one over the other, but I feel like it's important to mention that we have to evaluate fact checkers like we would any source of information. We want to find the ones who are responsible and ethical in their work. And those are the ones that actually will show their work. And by that, I mean, they don't just tell us if something is true or not. They show us the evidence. They provide us links to the evidence so that we can look at it for ourselves. They're detailed in the information so that we actually can get as much context as it is important. In their work, they will tell us how they do their work, what their best practices are. If they give a rating, what are the criteria for the different types of ratings that they give? And a habit that we encourage is don't just rely on one fact check, just like you shouldn't rely on one source of news. Use more than one. These are some of the more reputable fact-checking organizations that are out there doing this work. The first 6 are predominantly in the United States. The other 3 are more international. But the thing is, and they all do their work a little bit differently. They all give slightly different types of ratings. But these are really important to take a look at and see which ones you feel comfortable trusting. There is an exception to lateral reading. A lot of times you'll hear people say, don't read the comments on the internet. The reality is actually you should read the comments because a lot of times if somebody puts something on social media, if it's not true, chances are someone is going to call out that misinformation in the comments. And so by doing a quick look at the comments to a Facebook post or a tweet, you can actually probably get the information you're looking for without having to sort of go through all the steps yourself. So that is one exception to this idea of lateral reading, because sometimes it is good to just look at the comments. The fourth skill that we don't often always think about is geolocation. This is a really complex skill in a lot of ways. So I'm going to focus mainly on how you can use this as a tool, how you can teach people to use it. If you're not familiar with First Draft News, they actually have on their website what's called a geolocation challenge. And basically the idea is learning how to use Google Maps to verify a location. So this is one of their challenges. The idea is that so they give you a location. This is a picture of a mural. And the challenge is to find out what the rest of the mural says. So the mural continues around the corner. So we have one clue in the upper left. It actually gives us an address. So I'm going to take you through this to show in Google Maps. So I'm going to start by putting the address in Google Maps. And it's going to take me to that location. It's in Andalusia, Spain. I'm going to use the little orange figure in the lower right to get a street view. And when I get there, I discover that this location actually doesn't have a mural. So I'm going to go back to the original image to make sure that I'm looking at the right place. So I see this building in the background. So this is the right location. So now I actually need to go back to the historical view. By clicking on the date, I can actually go back in time to other times when the Google Street View camera went by this location. Now I can navigate. I'm going to go down the street and I'm going to turn the corner. And I'm going to turn around and I'm going to learn that the last word of this mural is infinitos. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to type the answer to make sure that I get it right. And I learned it correct. But one of the interesting things about the historical view is we can actually learn, we know it's not there now, we can actually get a sense of when this mural was painted. So in 2014, it was there. In 2013, it was there. However, in May of 2012, it wasn't. So we can actually get a time frame using Google Street View to sort of, if somebody had taken this picture, we can actually learn get a time frame. So here it's November 2018, and it's a blank wall. Okay, so how do we do this in a way to engage it with students? I'm going to show you some examples about how we put these together into learning experiences for students. And what we want to do is we want to make this what we call challenges and pathways. We want to find ways to put these skills together as a toolkit for verifying information. So if you're in education, these can be things like bell ringers, something simple that students can do quickly at the beginning of class. You can make things a challenge, put together some images, and verify images using reverse image search. These can be tied to things like current events, showing current misinformation, and using them as a way of talking about things that are actually happening in the world. Challenges using geolocation. The idea is that you can build these in a way to make it engaging for students. And here's one that I actually built. So this is my old neighborhood here in Chicago. I took this picture near where I used to live. And so the question is, what building is missing? So the first step is to figure out what intersection this is. And then when you find the intersection, you verify where it is. This street view actually shows that there is a building here that wasn't in the original image. So I navigate over to it. The most recent street view is this construction site. So if I go back in time using the back, I go to March 2009, and it was Murphy's Hot Dogs. And I will tell you that I was devastated when Murphy's closed. I love that place. It was so good. But the other thing is we can also go back to sort of see like what are like things that are going on previously. We can see how buildings have changed over time. We can see different businesses. So the historical view of Google Street View can be really interesting for exploring the history of a neighborhood. But obviously they only go back to about 2006, 2007 when this Google Street View camera started. Here's another interesting one. This is a TikTok video. So this is a popular video. So here's the interesting thing is like, can we figure out where this is? I'm gonna let this go. So we have a name of a store. You can Google it. So now we found the store.
And then I spent so many nights thinking how he did me wrong.
And so now we know this is a department store. We can see what locations they have.
And I learned.
And then we can try to figure out exactly which store this is. So now we have an address. We go into Google Maps. Which is pretty amazing. And so when you go into Google Street View, you can actually verify the location. Okay, so with image searches, like we could do this. You could do something similar like this. Put 2 images, 4 images together, make one of them false, and challenge students to figure out, okay, which one is authentic, which one's not. A great resource for fake images, if you're not familiar, Snopes has this section of their website called photography. So there's a lot of these great things. Some of them are authentic, like the giant alligator on the Florida golf course. That was a real giant alligator. It wasn't manipulated. So a lot of these are about viral images. Some of them are real, some of them are not. Another source that I'll plug is from the News Literacy Project. From our newsletter, The Sift, we do a weekly featured rumor resource. So we put together a Google slide presentation that goes through, usually it's image-based, but it's a relatively recent example that you can use. ICFN, International Fact Checking Network from the Poynter Institute, has a lot of amazing resources for fact checks and things that are current. We can put some of these together in a list later, but these are some of the accounts on Twitter that are doing a lot of great work. I love Fake History Hunter personally, because what people will do is they'll put out what are these old-timey photos, trying to make them look like they're authentic historical images, but they're not. Hoaxeye also does a lot of great things of debunking viral images. Bellingcat also does really in-depth fact-checking and digital verification. They've got a lot of great work there, and they do a lot of things internationally. But one video I would really encourage everyone to watch, if you get a chance, is called "Anatomy of a Killing" by BBC Africa Eye. There was a viral image of soldiers in Africa executing 2 women who were accused of being Boko Haram. It is a bit of a graphic video, but what BBC Africa Eye did was they actually used some really advanced digital verification. They actually were able to figure out not only exactly where the execution took place, they figured out what time of year it was, and they were actually able to identify the soldiers who committed the crime. It's a fascinating video that I would encourage you to take a look. It's some really deep, very in-depth stuff. And then datajournalism.com has a verification handbook. They've got a lot of great in-depth things that you can use to sort of go deeper into some of these tools. And then the amazing work of Dr. Claire Wardle and her team at First Draft News. They also do a lot of great work in the field of misinformation. And they have some resources that you can use as well. So we're going to pause here for some videos, or sorry, for some Q&A to see if there are some additional questions. And then I'm going to hand back over to Miriam, and then she can share some of the resources we have from the News Literacy Project.
Okay, we have a number of different questions. Marie started by asking, is there ever any legal action taken to stop this practice of image distortion?
Yeah, that's tricky. I mean, the reality is that, you know, it depends on a couple things. I mean, if it's a professional photographer, you know, there could be some legal action in the realm of copyright infringement. Depending on the content of the topic, you know, somebody could make a case for libel or slander. The reality is that, you know, most of the misinformation we see doesn't come from people who create it. It comes from people who are sharing. As much as 80% of the misinformation we see online is actually from people sharing it and amplifying it. And a lot of them probably don't even realize that it's not true. So getting to what I call tweet zero, for example, getting to the original source of misinformation is very, very difficult. And unfortunately, there really just aren't a lot of clear legal recourse for this.
Interesting. James asks, how hard is it to trace information post to their origins? It's kind of what you were just talking about. It's very hard, right?
It's possible. It's tedious. You have to understand how to search through social media platforms in particular. You know, each social media platform indexes posts differently. And a lot of times, somebody might put something out there, but then the original post is deleted. And then you only have people who are amplifying and sharing that misinformation. There are some more advanced tools especially with photos, looking at the EXIF data. Like if you can get to the original EXIF data, the sort of coding behind the digital image, you might be able to get to it, but that's also really difficult. So it can be done. It's just very, very difficult.
Okay, we'll do one more question from Melissa. Have you guys ever done any work with or against deep fakes? It's becoming really popular with a lot of apps that make creating them much easier.
Yeah, so deepfakes are difficult. Verifying a video can be challenging. The InVid screen capture, or image capture tool is one that can help. The thing is that most deepfakes are pretty easy to spot just by looking at them, right? A lot of the deepfakes that are out there are created either as sort of humor, satire kind of thing, or unfortunately, a lot of the deepfakes that are actually out there actually get into deepfakes related to pornography. But the thing is that if you look at them using those digital observation skills that Miriam mentioned, like if you pause a video and you look at it, there are often visual cues, that like a face doesn't quite line up, and most of them are pretty easy to spot off the bat. That being said, doing some lateral reading is more effective for that type of thing, because a lot of times a deepfake will have already been debunked by someone with more professional tools.
Interesting. All right, so we're almost at 8 o'clock. Miriam, you've got a little bit more to add, and then we're going to close out the formal part of our colloquium. Marie's going to come and give some closing comments, and then we're going to, for anyone who wants to stick around, John and Miriam have agreed to stay for a few more minutes afterwards to kind of have a little bit more of an informal conversation, or to just, continue on with what we've got. So, Miriam, take it away.
All right, well, thank you so much. And really great questions, everybody. So the News Literacy Project, we have a lot of resources and they're all available for free. So we wanna make sure that you know about them. Checkology is our e-learning platform. It has 13 lessons ranging from misinformation, First Amendment, the watchdog role in journalism, and a variety of things. We have a lesson in Spanish as well. So please take a look at checkology.org. We will add links in the chat in a minute. And it's very helpful. And we have a section of it for educators and one also for the general public now, which is a new thing for us. Our podcast, we just wrapped last night, actually, with a live podcast, our first season, examining how misinformation is affecting democracy. And there are some really great guests on there. So please take a look. It's on a variety of platforms, Stitcher, Apple, it's available for you.
What's the name of the podcast?
Is It a Fact? It's the middle icon there in the top.
Got it.
Yeah. The SIFT is a newsletter that we send out every Monday during the school year, and it has teachable moments. So we debunk conspiracy theories, hoaxes. We dive through the deep corners of the internet to bring you examples that can be used, and it is a great teaching tool. Yes, thank you. So if you would like to go to our website, again, I'll share the link in a moment. You can look at the archive as well as subscribe to get future ones. And it is only during the school year, so just so you know. Informable is a brain training app. So it gives you a walkthrough about the types of information or misinformation that you might be exposed to online. And then on our website and in social media. So please follow us. We do a lot of posts, and we have things that can be shared online about deep fakes, about how to debunk certain things, about how to find factual information. And then I would also love to mention Newslet Camp, which is a very immersive program that we have for educators. We have one coming up on December 10th. It's open to educators nationally. And actually, we should probably advance some of these slides, John. I'm just thinking. So Chickology.org. And since we're running out of time, we can just move ahead. If you have your phone handy, you can just like hold it up to the QR code and that'll launch the URL, and then you can just bookmark it. Our podcast, our brain training app, Informable, available on a variety of platforms, and Newslet Camp coming up. So it is with the Texas Tribune. You are all welcome to attend. And it's a mix of information seeking knowledge and facts. And it's in partnership with some really great journalists from the Texas Tribune. We really would appreciate your feedback from tonight. So if you don't mind taking a few minutes before you all head off for your evening, or whenever, or again, QR code, hold up your phone, and that'll launch the survey. It definitely helps us hone our professional development workshops and webinars for the future. So we hope to hear from you. If you have any questions, PD, as in professional development, pd@newslet.org, and you can reach us anytime, and follow us online as well. So, and we'll be here for your Q&A. So thank you so much.
Well, that was fantastic, Miriam. John, we are lucky today to have with us Ross Todd, and Ross always has some interesting reflections. So I'm going to turn it over to Ross for a few moments, and then Marie.
This is going to be very, very brief, but Miriam and John, I'm just delighted that you're here and you're able to bring the richness and depth of your work. You know what I thought was so powerful is that historically this whole arena of information literacy, media literacy is often about a checklist of skills. But what you did, I thought, and so beautifully, was to take this and make it for each of us a very personal and empowering experience. I can imagine, there are lots and lots of things that I learned in that, and I'm in your presentation, and I'm entirely grateful. But what I think it will do for me, and I hope for many of our students, is that as each of us engage in these practices of the critical examination of the image or the text, what stands out is that this becomes a deeply personal experience. And I just love that transformation that you've brought, taking it away from this kind of objective, stereotypical, and kind of traditional notion of information literacy to an empowering personal experience of deeply engaging with the text, whether that text is visual or video or text. So thank you very much. I just love that kind of really deeply personally constructive approach that you've taken.
Right, and learning skills, how to do things is so important too. Marie.
Yes, I would echo what Ross said. I found this fascinating. And I think that it's very powerful when we see these images and how they're manipulated. And we have to, it really does go so closely to our mission for information literacy and especially visual literacy, so that when people believe their eyes, that you have to say to them, yeah, but, and the old, I saw it on the internet, so it must be true. And now I saw it on Twitter and I saw it on Facebook and I saw it in my social media. And oh, my friend who was an expert in XYZ posted this, so it must be real and so forth. So there's all these, I think, very subtle. A lot of it is very subtle. Some of it is blatant. You can spot it right away. But what you, John and Miriam, kind of have been showing us is some of these subtleties. Not that you can't be a big, forensic detective and figure it out, but for the average person, it really is very difficult to figure out what is this a fact. I'm going to look up that podcast. But I invited the group to see if there were more questions, and we do have a couple more questions and a couple of comments that Joyce is saying we have to lead in this learning and make sure we retool our teachers to be able to do this. But I want to get to Julie's question. Do you have any thoughts on whether or not social media platforms themselves should do more to restrict the spread of misinformation?
Yeah, so before I answer that, I just want to say thank you, Ross. That was actually one of the nicest things I've heard people say about one of our presentations in some time. That was really amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
The interesting thing is social media platforms are not going to solve this problem. There are steps I think that they can do to mitigate it. But the reality is that this isn't a social media problem. This is a critical thinking problem. And I like to, as an example, Facebook. One of the worst places you can go is into some of these closed Facebook groups. And they are echo chambers that only focus on a particular viewpoint. And the thing is that people who are members of these groups, and it doesn't actually matter what it is, it can be Holocaust denial, it could be flat Earth, it could be the hardcore anti-vaccine conspiracy theory people, right? The thing is that the more deeply people believe in these things, the more it becomes tied to their identities. And if you deplatform them, so Facebook has been trying to ban Holocaust denial groups for some time. They actually just deleted one of the largest anti-vaccine Facebook groups that was out there from Larry Cook, who's one of the biggest anti-vaxxer conspiracy theories out there. The thing is that, yeah, they're no longer on Facebook, but they're finding each other somewhere else. So if one platform does something, those people are going to find another way to communicate with each other. So the reality is that the work that we have to do is make sure that people don't fall into those traps to begin with. Because a lot of those people, some of those people who believe in those things, there's a possibility that we can pull them back from the abyss. But others are so deep into these beliefs and so far gone that there's literally nothing you can do. Someone who believes the earth is flat, nothing you show them will ever convince them otherwise. So yeah, there are some things that the platforms can do. I think it would have to be fairly narrow. Like I think that, limiting, people sharing dangerous misinformation that's detrimental to public health. So like people who put out some of the very dangerous anti-vaccine things, or, the people who are putting out, dangerous misinformation relating to elections and whatnot. We can put some limits on those, but the reality is this is going to be solved more through education than technology.
Yeah, that's such a good example too about anti-vaxxers, because now that they're trying to develop, we're getting closer, I guess, to a vaccine for coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
How many people, some of the numbers that I saw were between 40% and 70% of people, even in New Jersey, said that they would even take the vaccine once it's out.
Yeah.
Kind of scary.
Well, it's important to remember the anti-vaccine movement in particular is interesting because it's a spectrum. We can't lump all people into one big category that way, because there are people who tend to be what we call vaccine hesitant, right? There are people who say, I am inoculated, I have my vaccines, but I don't want to get a flu shot every year because I always get sick with a flu shot. Or like with the COVID-19 vaccines, these have been, I'm a little worried about this. I may not be willing to trust so easily. But then you have the people on the very extreme ends that will say that, vaccines cause autism. These vaccines are going to implant us with microchips. This is going to be a form of population control. So there's a spectrum there. But it's also important to recognize that we can probably reach many of those people through a comprehensive, rational education campaign.
Yeah, I think that I was just hearing today too that they haven't tested any of these vaccines on children under 12.
That's always one of the very difficult things is vaccines are often not very well tested on kids.
Yeah, so parents would be, you remind us, John, they would be well to hesitate, right? They're definitely doing their job. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, there's a couple. Elizabeth Miller, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? So we can get, there she is.
Sure. Do you all have any suggestions for how to empower people to want to do these kind of things when they're reading stories and things?
Yeah, I think it's important to try to remind people that everything you post on social media is your reputation on the line. And none of us wants to be the one who gets made fun of or looks foolish because they posted something that's false. But it's also important. It's important for us all on this side of the equation, right? Those of us who are trying to fight misinformation. It's really important for us to also remember that we have to approach this with empathy. There's a lot of people who share misinformation don't always realize that what they're sharing is false. People sometimes will share things legitimately from a sense of altruism. And they may believe it's something that's true because they're reacting from that, misinformation uses our emotions against us in that sense. So we want to recognize that, it's easy for us to get manipulated, but it's also, just remember, one of the reasons why this feels so overwhelming and why those of us doing this work feel exhausted is because misinformation is bombarding us and trying to overwhelm us. So it's important to recognize that there's a great deal of it out there. It's easy to sort of give into it. And so I think a good way of presenting it is look, we can be part of the solution in pushing back against misinformation and helping to make sure that we're prioritizing things that are true.
Wonderful. Connie, do we see any other questions in the chat?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was actually just looking at this incredible vocabulary list that Joyce Valenza just shared. That gives you, it's just it's a news literacy vocabulary, and I got a little distracted by that.
That's okay. We do have a question. I just noticed, Connie. Sorry to interrupt. We have a question from James.
Yes, we do. And then Alan, did you want to ask a question also? Hope you're on mute. James?
Maybe James first and then Alan.
James, go ahead, James.
I see James's question in the chat.
Okay, so what are the implications of proposed changes to Section 230 on misinformation and the handling of misinformation? And Section 230, of course, is the platform language.
Yeah, the Communications Decency Act. So one of the things that's important to remember is that the original act is almost 25 years old. And the reality is that legislation relating to technology is always going to be behind. Legislation is often very reactive. So I think, I don't know a lot of, the problem is that a lot of the things that people are talking about with Section 230 in particular has become very politicized. And, when we're talking about legislation, it's very easy to sort of be very selective about what you talk about, because we're talking about federal legislation in particular, which is always so easy to read. I think the reality is that people are trying to legislate for different reasons, right? Some people are saying we need to amend Section 230 because they believe the social media platforms are actively suppressing conservative voices in particular. Other people want to amend Section 230 because they think the platforms should do more to limit what's on there. And the debate about Section 230, a lot of it is actually from positions of ignorance in that people don't fully understand what Section 230 actually says. So this is the challenge, is that we can try to have a conversation about it. The problem is that a lot of what's out there is based off of misinformation or propaganda. It's been politicized. But I think the reality is we'll never be able to legislate this. I think what's going to happen probably more rapidly is that we're going to see a user backlash against these platforms in one way or another. We're going to see people we're already seeing people leave Twitter to go to alternative platforms, especially conservative voices. A lot of them are going over to Parler and Gab and the like.
Yeah.
We're going to see more and more people leaving Facebook and Twitter. A lot of people have been pushing against Pinterest. Pinterest has taken some very good steps in recent months to try to control their misinformation problem because they want it to be what it was originally intended to be, right? So Pinterest is trying to Pinterest has kind of flown under the radar in a lot of ways because we often talk about Twitter and Facebook more. But I think the reality is that this is going to be something that users are going to force changes by either leaving the platforms entirely and joining something new, or recognizing the platforms are going to recognize that they have to crack down on this. And people can cry censorship all they want. A private company can censor all the content they want, and there's really not much most people can do about it except leave and go to another platform.
Okay, we have about 10 minutes left. We do have a couple. Ariel Smith asked this earlier, what about bias in the information that is most readily available? For example, getting responses that are Eurocentric and leaving out other regions of the world.
Man, we could have a whole other hour talking about bias. So there are a couple different ways to look at that. I'll try to be brief. One of the first things we have to recognize when we're looking at news and information is that the overwhelming majority of what we see is actually not news, it's opinion. Especially if we look at major television networks, like the major news networks, as much as 80 to 85% of the content that they broadcast is actually opinion and commentary. And the rest is news and analysis. So one of the first things we have to recognize is that a lot of the things that we sort of criticize the media for being biased is actually intended to be biased because it's commentary. The other part of that has to do with the way news judgments are made, and the biases that are sort of indicative in that realm. So yeah, a lot of things tend to be Eurocentric. But to bring it more back towards the United States, one analogy I like to use is the difference between a hurricane and wildfires, right? When a hurricane is bearing down on the southeastern part of the United States, major news networks will go practically wall to wall with coverage, and there will be live shots, and we'll see the ocean crashing behind the reporters, and there's just wall to wall coverage of a hurricane that affects one very sort of narrow section of the United States. The entire West Coast is on fire. I mean, like the town of Paradise, California, which is near part of where I grew up in Northern California, was wiped out. It's like almost the entire town. So you have these huge regions on fire, not nearly the same level of coverage. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at how things are covered, why things are covered to the degree that they are. Part of that is going to be on us as news consumers to push back against these news organizations, to sort of say, hey, your bias is showing in the way that you're covering this, because you're showing only certain regions. So it's a very complicated topic. It is something that we teach in our Checkology virtual classroom. We do have a lesson called Understanding Bias, where we go through 5 types and 5 forms of news media bias and how to understand it in a more objective way. But it's very, very complex from there. So hopefully that kind of got to the gist of her question.
Well, I think we're about ready to wrap things up. I wanted to thank you and Miriam so much for sticking around a little bit longer. Do either of you have some closing comments, or I actually have one last question because that's me. What has surprised you both the most in the last few months about news literacy or fake news? Sorry, I'm not supposed to use that. But the disinformation that's happening. And what's hopeful? Let's do something. Let's end with something hopeful.
I think what's hopeful is that we know that educators all over the country are eager to teach this to their students across both, but also more and more, especially in the last year, teachers are sort of relearning the importance of their librarians. Librarians, we know, have been doing this work for a very long time, and as teachers are recognizing that this is a problem, they're sort of taking control of this and saying, I want to teach this to my students. I think beyond that, what gives me hope is that we are talking about misinformation in a way that is more about focusing on what's true and what's not. And I think that a lot of news organizations are being a lot more deliberate in calling things out and saying that these things are not true. It's still a major problem. But I think that more and more people are recognizing that, I shouldn't get my news from social media. And recognizing that you should go to other sources. So I still remain very optimistic about the next couple of years in particular, about how things are going to change. Miriam, what about you?
Say that says a lot for somebody who's spelunking through the deep crevices of the internet for misinformation. So the fact that John can still be hopeful gives us all hope. I think I am still, maybe I shouldn't be, but surprised by the velocity of information that comes at us. It seems to be ever evolving, which is one of the things that I love, that we're like, okay, let's focus on the content because the technology changes so fast. Like we can't keep up with platforms and technology, right? So we need to focus on something else. And the hope, what gives me hope is working with an amazing team, but also that we keep getting asked to do these types of presentations where we can have a dialogue and a discussion about what is happening and how we can make a difference, right? Like, so there's a ripple effect that can happen. So I love that.
Yep, source the source kind of thing. Marie, would you like to take us out with in our evening?
Sure. This has just been wonderful, and love the shout out to librarians and the recognition that we've been doing this work, 900 years, more than 900 years. But it's becoming ever more critical for our democracy, right? And our very lives are at stake in getting the right information and the good information and being able to tell the difference between fake news and real news. I wanted to just end with a couple more just thank yous. We're most in debt to Megan Darling and Jennifer Berry and David Platt, who are our Beta Phi Mu Executive Board. We have 2 past presidents here because I recognized Hope Preston, all the way from Oregon here tonight, and also Melissa Hoffman, another one of our, so we're like kind of welcoming back a lot of our alumni in addition to our students. I also wanted to thank the faculty who were with us tonight. Ross, Joyce, Nancy Cronick is also here, and of course Steve Magnoni from the library. I think that this is one of these events that we have many co-sponsors. It's not just a MI Colloquium, so a lot of students get to see that we are a bigger tent with a lot more of our family from MI, our alumni, our faculty, and our honored guests. So I just think I loved it. Connie, thank you so much for letting us end on a hopeful note. We all we, we are all educators, and if we didn't believe in hope, we wouldn't be educators.
That's so true. So true.
So good night, everybody. This is great, and we're very, very happy that all of you joined us and with great questions and comments in the chat too.
And again, I look forward to reading your reflections, Colloquium students, and again, I will anonymously share some of those with Miriam and John so they can see how much impact that you guys have had on our students. It'll be amazing, and you'll be touched. So thanks, everybody. Good night. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and a great week next week. And we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everyone, good night.
Thanks.